Hi, welcome to Volleyball One-on-One. I'm Honor July, the founder and owner, and today I'm sharing a new video to express, to be honest, some of my frustrations, real frustrations with some of the new ways that volleyball spiking technique is being taught. And I'm here with Ryan Kendrick. Ryan Kendrick owns a company called Dynamic Tape, and you're a
musculoskeletal physiotherapist, as we say in Australia.
Okay, and he has extensive experience working with top athletes in all sports, including tennis. You brought back one of the...
Yeah, Greg Rosetsky, who's a US Open finalist and was fourth in the world, had a lot of injury problems, and we basically had to rebuild his game and try and change the way he was moving to reduce load and keep him going.
And Ryan and his product is also used by top players on the Brazilian indoor national team. So he's got a lot of expertise in neurological, muscular areas, which I don't necessarily am the best. For me, the biggest thing that I'm seeing is some new techniques are being taught for volleyball spiking that I don't agree with. And the justification behind all of it is that, people's shoulders are getting messed up and that you have to change it because of this. And, let's now look at tennis and baseball as the right ways to do it. And for me, the first thing that comes to mind is baseball and tennis are completely different than volleyball, okay? Baseball and tennis, tennis, you got a tennis racket, so you got the weight of the tennis racket. And then on baseball, you're trying to throw a ball, your only goal is maximum power. So often you see these baseball pitchers coming in from down here and they're throwing things completely like volleyball. And I think volleyball has 4 or 5 major differences than baseball. Number one, in volleyball, the ball is moving when you contact it, and it's coming in from a side motion. So for example, I couldn't imagine trying to teach a kid playing tennis, throw a ball across the window and have them try and hit it out of the sky, okay? And it's the same with volleyball, it's like, if you're having this gigantic motion and now you got to go and try and hit something, it's going to be a lot of problems. And that's one of the things that we're seeing. So number one, the ball is moving. Number two, your target area of where you need to hit is moving. So in volleyball, you may need to hit there, there, there. Also, how you hit the ball is different because in baseball and tennis, you're basically always going forward to the same area in front of you. Whereas volleyball, if I'm playing beach or indoor, let's say I'm playing left side hitter, I might go line, angle. So my planes of my hit are completely different. Look at my window. Okay, so if I'm spiking, this is my window. How I'm attacking the ball is completely different. In baseball and tennis, there's no 3-step approach. You're not jumping in the air. So all of these things basically mean that the form on your technique should, where possible, be more than just about power. The speed of the arm swing is important. The ability to hit a wide range of shots is important. Plus, the ability to go in and contact the ball and do different things with the ball and disguise your arm swing is also important. So, some of these new techniques basically discount all of that. And that's a real concern for me. Okay, the next thing that I also, and this is why I want to bring Ryan in. Ryan, come a little closer. So I know I'm a big guy. I'm a little intimidated right now. But the other thing that I have a problem with is they're starting to teach some bad stuff that I think can lead to other serious injuries. So for example, one of the things that they're teaching is this inverted W on the arm swing, which can create some serious timing issues. You've seen baseball players, what is that baseball player?
Strasburg at the moment, who's had issues with his elbow. Yes.
Okay, this is one of the big things where they're basically saying you should pull your arm down here to avoid injury. And now, we're seeing a whole slew of new injuries like this inverted W, as well as this really late cocking, which is causing other problems. Also, some of these are now, because of this, you can actually extend and have problems with your back. So for me, I think the biggest thing often with volleyball injuries is, one, people are not engaging their hips. If you're generating hip power, most of the shoulder injuries are going to be avoided. 1. 2, deceleration. The ability to decelerate your arm is the other key. Now, there are a few other things I'm going to be talking about with Ryan that are very, very specific that I think you want to be avoiding. And if you can avoid some of these, it's going to help reduce the injury chances. Or if you do have an injury, these are things you want to be considering. Does that sound fair?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so a few things. Now, what I think is good form and technique is, depending on how high you jump, either coming in from a 1, 2, 3, or coming straight into it. So some of the girls aren't jumping as high, so they're going straight into their pull. Now, the big thing is, you know, this pull right here. Now, for me, I've always taught and I've always said, hey, a pretty fast pull is better because you're in the air for a short amount of time. So I want to get my arm back and ready, okay? Now, some of the new technique that they're teaching is going, we want this long pull down here because it's going to be avoiding injury. Now, I think, Ryan, correct me, and this is where I want to start having you come into conversation, is I think if you're really bringing this above your head the whole time, you're going to have problems. You know, you think of painters, workers, anyone that's working above their head, you start to have shoulder issues.
Look, I think in simple terms, you know, we see that. The longer you're above your head, the more likely you are to have injuries. So if we could minimise that time that you spend in overhead positions, that's obviously just from first principles a good idea. But also if you're hitting your maximal wind up when you're way over your head as well, that's also going to put a lot of load on your shoulder, and your shoulder's not in the best position then to accommodate that load either in terms of the muscle function or the ligamental support for your shoulder.
Now let's look at this. Now in terms of this, how is this in terms of a position? And this is a wind up.
Yeah, look, I think it looks good, and as you say, a lot of that comes with that trunk opening up, because what we don't want is to just use your arm, right? And if somebody's hitting really front on, often they'll just really muscle it with the arm, and they get a lot of increase what we call that external rotation, that turning out of the arm. If you are hitting, because you know, you can't always hit the perfect shot in volleyball, as you've already said, you know, things are moving, you know, your target's moving and so on, so you've got to, you know, be able to adapt on the fly, and sometimes you might be hitting fairly straightforward, but what you do need to do, regardless of which way you're going, is have a contribution from your trunk, as you've said. So it's either that opening out, or it's actually bringing some extension in, and that's why you need to have really good mobility in your back as well, so you don't overload certain parts of your back and run into injury trouble there. But what we don't want is just all arm back here.
Now that's one of the things that I'm seeing in terms of how they're teaching. Like I look at some of the previous videos before and after on some of these new techniques, and often the technique is just about the players starting and getting their hip open when they're jumping in and spiking. So often the players coming in very straight to the net and trying to force the power here, whereas they can just be open and ready, and now they're generating their power. The other problem I have with some of these new techniques is that a lot of this cross-body got, and I feel like it's too much. Okay, but let's go back to the thing. So pull is fine. Now the other thing that we want to talk about is the plane of the shoulders. That we don't want to go beyond this plane. Is that correct? So in terms of my pull, notice I'm
right.
Never beyond this.
Yeah, again, as you mentioned, you touched on it earlier, it's a timing thing, and that's where the inverted W can be an issue in our throwing or hitting type sports. And look, it's not to say if you have that, you're definitely going to get issues. That's not the case. We can see people with those problems who never have trouble. We can see somebody who has what we would consider a really great technique, and they may run into trouble. So it's not hard and fast, but you've got to play the statistics on these things and go, you know, the better your technique, the less likely you are to have problems. And so, you know, if you're getting way behind, and that happens if you're in that your hand's still really down when you should be at the end of that cocking, that late cocking stage. If you're down here still, as your trunk comes forward, you've still got to get that hand back up into that cock position. And what tends to happen, and you know, we see this, is that people will flick it back up, and you end up with the trunk coming forward and that real exaggerated width into the shoulder, and that puts a lot of load on it. If your hand is already here, as in your position, just actually my momentum of my trunk will actually bring my hand, will flick me back, and I'm in that position ready to go. And because I'm actually coming up to the ball, by the time I get up here, my maximal external rotation, I've already actually taken a lot of the load off my shoulder because my elbow's already come up now. I don't want to be way back here, which is probably more necessary in your throwing sports. In volleyball, we've got a high contact point, we're coming up to it, So it's actually okay to come off there, and we don't get that real wind up back here like we can see in baseball.
And it's just not necessary. There's so much power you can generate from just this and this that you don't need this big, and it's not about maximum power most of the time for volleyball. You're not trying to hit the ball as hard as you can all the time. The other thing is on contact, like, you know, one of the things I definitely teach is that on contact you want to be dropping your left shoulder so that you have a little bit more of a stable, the extra height, but you're also a little bit more stable in the shoulder. And come stand here in front of me, Ryan, just hold my, trying to have that power. Like for me, I want to bring this into it. So now I'm like, you feel that power,
absolutely.
You know, but it's not behind you. You know what I mean?
Right, yeah.
The power is, I'm hitting it up there in front.
Again, we see problems, I think, if people have, again, not enough contribution from the trunk, you know, and so when they're actually, they're trying to get that, you know, coming up, and because their trunk is here, you know, if I don't move my trunk, I can only get my arms to here. So if my trunk is stiff and I am getting into these positions, it means it's all coming from extra, you know, range of movement from the arm, which is a problem. And so what we'll see is the elbow is behind the line of the trunk, you know, just before contact, and that's a problem as well. As you say, one, you don't get the power, but you're also getting a lot of load on that shoulder. So we want that to be actually in front, you know, elbow just in front of your shoulder and in front of the line of the trunk, but certainly not behind the line of the trunk as you're coming up to contact.
Okay, I've shot a number of videos on generating power. Just Google volleyball spiking, you'll see those. So there's 4 areas and we talk about that extensively. Now the final thing that I find important that makes me nervous is, just stand in front, is where they want your arm swing to finish. Okay, for me, I go, here's my arm swing, look at the momentum, look how it's following through. I'm generally going to try and have it go in that same line. Some of them are like, they want it to come across the body like this, and I find that too much.
Yeah, look, I think there are a couple of issues there. You know, the way we dissipate load is to move at each segment of the body, and the trunk is one of those, and that can be either in flexion or rotation, and probably depending on the angle that you're hitting at, a bit of rotation is probably okay.
I don't mind a little bit of rotation.
Right.
I think that's fine, especially if you're turning and stuff like that.
Where we see big issues, and you know, we can extrapolate some of the research. As you say, there are big differences from our cricket, our tennis, and so on. And baseball, particularly in cricket, you know, you've got a foot on the ground, you've got big ground reaction forces coming up as well. But what we do know is if you get, you know, what we call a big separation angle, so your hips one position, your shoulders another, a lot of derotation, that leads to issues particularly with the back, and particularly if you're going from extended and rotated one way to flexed and rotated the opposite way. So, you know, that has to be taken into consideration and trying to, you know, get technique for performance, as well as, you know, you've got to blend it all. What I might think is fantastic from an injury prevention biomechanical point of view is not necessarily any good to you if you can't hit the ball over the net. So you've got to combine the
that's
two.
One of the most important things. Like, some of these techniques are really down here, and the problem with that is the amount of time and it takes for a player to go up and swing is so long that often you'll have a timing issue that will cause other injuries, or the player just can't hit the ball because they're not ready to swing. So again, getting ready to swing with a little bit more of a compact arm swing is key to doing some of those things. Okay, anything else you want to add?
No, look, I think we've covered it quite well there.
It's a pretty long video. Okay, if you're interested, we've shot some incredible stuff with Ryan and dynamic tape, using tape to remove some of these things like this late cocking, encouraging hip movement, also to help with some of these volleyball injuries that are commonly associated. At Volleyball 101, we got over 2,000 volleyball videos. We've got over 150 videos just on spiking, all taught by some of the best players and coaches in the world. So make sure you check it out. Also, if you have interest or questions, make sure you contact me directly at Volleyball 101. I love talking about spiking, and yeah, I love your feedback. And we also do a free spiking review, a spiking evaluation for all new members of our website.